Unfortunately, I don't believe I can share a range without better understanding what the role entails, but we can discuss it later on in the process, or if you have a ballpark range, I'd love to hear that as well.
Okay. How does that
I will
feel?
not say a number. You will not torture it out of me. But in all seriousness though, I would say 9 out of 10 times they will share a number with you. Like sometimes they'll push
Mm,
it on later in the interview process,
yeah.
but they'll usually just tell you. And I appreciate that transparency. I'm not going to get deep into an interview process if I don't know the salary.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Data Scientist Show. Today we have Jess Ramos. Jess is a senior data analyst at Crunchbase and a LinkedIn learning instructor. She has a bachelor degree in math, Spanish, and business from Barry University and a master degree in business analytics from University of Georgia. Today we'll talk about SQL in the real world. Is job hopping bad for you? And how she negotiated her salary. If you like the show, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment, give me a 5-star review. Welcome to the show, Jess.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
So, Jess, before you joined your current company, you were at Freddie Mac as a senior risk analyst for just 6 months. What made you want to leave?
Yeah, that's a great question. And just to clarify, LinkedIn shows 6 months because it's exclusive on the ending months, but I was only actually there for 4 months. So even less. I decided to leave for a few different reasons. The first main reason is that I didn't see my career growing there. So the tech stack I was using was a lot older than I was expecting. And I felt like it was a huge step back for my technical skills from my previous role. So I didn't really see myself growing my technical skills the way that I wanted to. And it definitely was not what I was expecting based on what I heard in my interviews. And then the culture was also very traditional and corporate as well. I was expecting a more startup culture on this team, and it really wasn't. So that's not necessarily like a bad thing. It just wasn't the right fit for me. I'm
Mm,
definitely more of a startup person. I like to innovate and move quickly. I like to do new things all the time, work on the latest and greatest tools and tech stack. So it just didn't feel like the best fit for my career. And then I also didn't have great mentorship while I was there. So I was in a very isolated role and I didn't feel super supported by my manager. I didn't feel set up to succeed. And there was a point too where a lot of lines and boundaries were crossed that made me lose a lot of trust. And from that point, I tried to repair the career type of stuff. But once like
yeah.
certain lines and boundaries were crossed, I was like, oh, I just don't think this is going to be a fit going forward. And I started looking.
Yeah. And a lot of people are afraid of leaving a job after they just joined for a couple months. They were worried recruiter will label them as job hoppers. What are your thoughts about this?
I think that's completely fair and valid because I also felt that way. I was terrified. I was like, am I making the wrong decision? Am I going to ruin my career? No one's going to hire me. This 4 month stint at a job is going to make me look indecisive, like I'm not loyal, I can't commit. And it wasn't true. I did have to work on the way that I explained that in interviews, but I got hired at Crunchbase, a really cool, innovative tech company, and I've been here for a year now. So I think the right recruiter and hiring manager is going to understand and see that it's okay if you're not in a good fit somewhere. And the best thing for you to do is make the best decision for you and the company and move on to something else. So I think it's a perfectly valid fear, but I think people are starting to move past that mindset. And it's honestly okay to be a job hopper. Like, I think it's normal for people to move jobs every 1.5 to 2 years in the tech startup world.
Hmm.
You just learn and grow so much from that.
Yeah. And I think it's also important to craft your story when you interview because the recruiter is always going to ask you. So, what's your advice for that?
My advice is to have your story nailed down. Run it by some mentors, some friends, if you have any recruiter friends. Get some honest feedback because you don't want to sound like a red flag. And I definitely did sound like a red flag when I first started interviewing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a pretty blunt and direct person. So I'm interviewing again and I'm talking about how the job didn't meet expectations. It wasn't what I was told in interviews. I was using SAS most of the time instead of SQL, even though I was told that I'd be spending most of my time in SQL. So I think the way I explained that, I was basically signaling to recruiters and hiring managers that I wasn't flexible and adaptable. I wasn't willing to try new things or be flexible if the job duties changed. And then I was also basically advertising that I hadn't used SQL in 4 months because I was using SAS, which is a
Mm.
very antiquated, older tool. That's not like the sexiest thing to have, on your resume nowadays.
Yeah.
So yeah, I basically was not going about it the right way. And then I talked to a mentor after a few weeks. I was like, hey, I'm getting interviews, but I'm not moving past the hiring manager. I don't know why. And my mentor is like, yeah, you sound like a red flag. And that's like honest feedback that we need. So I did change my story. I didn't lie, but I just talked about how the culture wasn't a good fit.
Mm.
Everyone was in office in Washington, D.C. I was like one of the only remote people. The company didn't have the tools and infrastructure to support remote workers. And then I finished with, but in the future, I'm looking for a company with XYZ,
Yeah.
modern tech stack, a remote culture, and made sure it led into what I was looking for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's a great story. And thanks for sharing that. So, what's your day to day in your current job? What's your tech stack?
So, my tech stack in my current job is mostly Snowflake. I spend most of my time in SQL. We also use some A B testing software. We use Split. I think it's pretty similar to Amplitude. I think they're pretty closely matched. And then we also use Notion, which I know Notion isn't like a typical technical skill, but it
Mm-hmm.
really is a skill to be able to document projects and events and data. So I do a lot of documentation as well.
Cool. And what does the typical day looks like for you?
So we work in 2 week sprints. So I'm able to kind of know what my workload is going to look like for that 2 weeks. And we delegate all of our projects pretty evenly across the sprints. And it really depends. I work a lot on creating views, creating insights in SQL, wrangling data, making dashboards to track different experiments or events. And then I've also been working on a project working group that has been working towards product experimentation. So I'm getting a lot of A B testing and working with stakeholders experience as well.
Which part of the work do you spend most of your time or energy?
Energy, probably working with stakeholders
Mm-hmm.
because there's a lot of like back and forth, understanding their needs, understanding what's leadership's goal, what do we want to accomplish here, and then aligning metrics and data to those goals. So that
Mm.
takes a lot of energy. I would say time, probably in SQL. I spent a lot of time writing queries for different things, tracking different insights, and preparing data so we can have insights in the future. So, for example, working with our front end engineers to create events and then QAing those events. That was a lot of things at once, but
Yeah.
yeah, that's where I spend most of my time.
And you talked about you're using SQL a lot, and SQL is very easy to get into. Select, tables, join, but there are a lot of nuances in SQL. So, what are some challenges in like writing a good SQL query in the real world? How's that different from taking a online course or from your things you learn from your master degree?
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of differences. I think one big difference is optimization. That's not something you're really concerned about in courses because you're working in a small data set. It has maybe 20 rows or even 1,000 rows, which is nothing in the real world. So in the real world, we're constantly thinking about optimization. How do we make our queries run faster so they spend less time and money to run? And another thing we really forget about in courses is understanding the data model. So, where does the data come from? How is it connected to other tables in the data model? What's the relationship between this table and this table? Do they have the same level of granularity or are they different? How are you going to join them? What type of join do you want to do? So there's all these questions that really spin out from just the data model and understanding how the data is related to everything else. And I think that's something that I didn't learn in the real world until I started making mistakes. So maybe doing an inner join instead of a left join or vice versa, or
Mm.
not understanding what happens when you join two tables with different granularity levels. And I think the third thing that comes to mind that is not in courses but is in the real world is relating the data to business. So sometimes you have to understand the business context to even create what you need in SQL. You
Mm.
have to engineer new features and new columns and really create business logic in SQL. And then once you finish your query and your insights, you have to turn those back around and relate them back to the business. So that's definitely like a cycle that's always going around as a data analyst, coming from the business, going to the data, and then back to the business. And that's one of like the harder skills to learn.
Yeah. And you mentioned optimization. So, what are the typical areas you think about when you think about optimization?
I think the best rule of thumb I have is get rid of anything you don't need and get rid of it as soon as possible.
Mm.
So just understanding like the order of execution in SQL, knowing when SQL does what when it executes the query is really helpful. And you want to be able to filter out all the data you can as soon as you can. So if you don't need certain columns or certain rows, you filter those out as soon as you can and don't even bring them into your query.
Mm. You also talk about relay data to the business. I think a lot of times when the stakeholders ask us a question, we just want to, dive into the query and get something out as soon as possible. Do you have a framework? How do you ask questions and then translate those questions into the design of your query?
Yeah, I think the number one thing you have to do is ask the stakeholder, what do you want to know? Like, what question do you want to answer and why is it important? Because if you don't understand what they're trying to decide on or understand better, it's really
Mm.
hard to develop a query. I actually made a mistake as a data analyst intern, and that's where I learned the big lesson of make sure you understand the business context. Just because your SQL query runs and creates an output doesn't mean you got the right answer. I was counting the number of orders. So we had orders that went through these different statuses and they could go like through certain statuses multiple times. They could like hit a status and then go backwards and go through them again. So I was counting how many times orders hit this certain status for a stakeholder because I thought that it was important for them to know how many instances there were of that status. But then I got like this crazy number that was like severely overestimated. And
Mm.
I realized that the question they wanted to actually answer was how many orders have hit this status. So what I had failed to do was count the distinct number of orders. I was counting the distinct number of instances instead of
Yeah.
the number of orders. So that was a time where I realized I didn't understand the business context. I didn't ask the stakeholder enough questions.
Mm.
I just counted how many times that status happened and called it a day. Whereas I should have been thinking about the fact that orders could go through statuses multiple times.
Yeah, that's a great example. I think we have all been there. So, when you ask clarifying questions, how do you make sure you don't misunderstand the metric? Do you write down a document and ask them to review, or actually maybe create like some sample table, do analysis on a small subset, and then get their feedback? What's your approach?
Yeah, I think one good thing that helps with that is using written communication.
Mm.
I think sometimes it's easier to like explain things out on a call, But when you're able to write things down and communicate through like Slack or a messaging system, it gives people more time to like process and reread what you said. So I think written communication goes a really long way with not being misunderstood. And then if needed, you can hop on a call and talk through some of the details. I also think it's good to kind of be transparent with the stakeholders and sometimes explain the trade offs. So it can be a little tricky sometimes giving stakeholders a bunch of options. So you want to kind of narrow it down as much as possible when talking to
Mm,
them. But sometimes I'll be like, hey, I have option A where I can do this and it'll tell us this. Here's the business question it'll answer. Or option B, it doesn't have this like option A, but it answers this question. So just kind of showing them the differences between them
mm.
and making sure they understand. And then also being transparent with what is assumed here, what did we filter out of our query, and just making sure they're in the loop with those types of decisions.
Yeah. Uh, a lot of times, stakeholders think they know what they want, but they actually don't. I really like what you mentioned to give them options. So, as a data analyst or data scientists, we need to be proactive to come up with different solutions. A lot of times, there's no model, there's no query will solve this problem perfectly. They have to make some trade offs. I think it's great that you give them options and show them the pros and cons. So they also feel, oh, I have a choice in this. When they pick one model, they also feel they're more involved in the entire workflow process. And so on LinkedIn and in your course, you talk about intermediate level SQL. So what is intermediate level SQL and how is that different from, beginner level SQL?
Yeah, I think a huge separating factor from beginner to intermediate is understanding the business. So, solving more complicated problems. You're not just finding like the max value in this column. Instead, you have a complicated business problem that you have to unravel and design a query for and then interpret the results for. So, the business understanding and business context is something I really wanted to embody in my course and some of the technical skills. So my course includes CTEs, case, unions, window functions. Oh my gosh, I'm forgetting the fifth chapter. Why am I forgetting? Oh, and self joins. Self joins. I basically wanted to include the most used intermediate to advanced concepts in my course that would cover so much ground. My goal wasn't to teach the most complicated things in SQL. It was to teach the some of the more difficult concepts that you're going to use the most on the job. So,
Hmm.
I think those skills are a really good place to start going to the intermediate level. And from there, just doing other advanced things as well, like, bringing in subqueries and intersect and just learning different ways to manipulate data.
Yeah. There's a lot of courses out there give you kind of 10, 20 advanced concept, but I think you have experience to show the audience what's actually used in your day to day. And we can start with mastering those and learn the rest along the way. So,
Absolutely.
when you interview for a senior role, how do you prepare for your SQL interview?
Well, luckily, by the time I interviewed with Crunchbase, I was pretty warmed up because I job searched mid 2022 and then I job searched again towards the end of 2022. So I had
Mm,
lots of interviewing practice. I think practice goes a long way. Preparing for the SQL interview, I honestly didn't like do too much prep work. Like I didn't practice SQL a ton because I was pretty much, using it on the job for the most part for the past few years. But I just made sure I understood like very commonly asked about concepts. So I just Googled like most common SQL interview questions and made sure I had a good answer for those. So, for example, what's the difference between union and union all? How would you calculate, aggregating this by date? So, just like conceptual questions like that. And I really learned a lot through just doing practice interviews and
hmm
getting through real life interviews. I learned so much from trying and failing or trying and succeeding. So by the time I got to Crunchbase, I already felt like super practiced and ready to go.
And does it mean you probably won't get a job if you don't do well in the technical interview?
That's a loaded question. Short answer, no, because you can definitely still get a job if you don't do well in the technical interview. But my long answer is that you do have to know your technical stuff to get a job in data. You can't just coast without having any sort of technical chops. But I will say, a lot of times technical interviews aren't about you just getting the right answer, because
Mm,
sometimes you don't get the right answer, or maybe you struggle through it and then you finally get there. And that's okay. When I was interviewing at Crunchbase, I actually made a small mistake in one of my queries. And I don't even remember at this point what it was. Like, it was so insignificant that I don't even remember. But the interviewer was like, "Why'd you choose to do this?" And I was like, "Wait a minute. Actually, I don't need to do this because blah, 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 blah." So the
mm,
fact that I like fixed my mistake and then explained why it was a mistake, that was like huge. And that was in the feedback I got from my manager when I got my offer.
mm.
So you do have to know your technical stuff to do well in a technical interview and get a job, but it's perfectly fine to make a mistake or to not even get to the final answer. As long
Yeah.
as you're showing that you know what you're doing, you're able to collaborate and work through challenges, that's what's most important.
Yeah. And a lot of times we feel nervous when the interviewer point out the mistake in your during your interview. Some people freeze, "Oh, what am I going to do?" I think it happened to me before. But I think it's actually a good sign. They give you a hint. That means they try to help you. They want to help you succeed. So just take a minute, focus on the problem, and not to freak out during the interview. Uh,
Absolutely. And if I just want to add, if they aren't collaborating with you and setting you up to succeed, you probably don't want to work there. When you're doing a technical interview, you're also interviewing the company and seeing how they communicate and collaborate. So it's honestly a red flag if they just like point out your mistakes and they're trying to trick you and they don't collaborate and give you any feedback.
That's a great point. So, what are some red flags we should look for when we go to interviews? How do we use this opportunity to interview the company?
Yeah, I actually had the most like gut wrenching, like sweaty live coding ever in my last
Mm,
job search. Like, I was like mentally combusting. So the first red flag of this situation was that I was ambushed with the live coding. And for me, if I'm a candidate somewhere, communication's huge. Like, I want to know what to expect for the next interview. I want to know how to best prepare. I want to know who I'm interviewing with. And if a company can't prepare me for those things, then they're probably not super organized. And during this certain recruiting process, I wasn't working with a recruiter. I applied for the job, immediately got an email from the hiring manager, and she was like, "Hey, we're going to have an interview at this time." I was like, "Awesome. What should I expect? How do I best prepare?" And you have to remember, at this point, I hadn't even talked to the recruiter. So I didn't know anything about the company. I didn't know the salary range. I knew nothing. And then she never responded. So
mm,
I go into this interview only knowing about a little bit about the company based on my research. And she asked me about my experience for like 10 minutes. And then 10 minutes into the interview, she's like, "Okay, we're going to do a live SQL coding." So mentally, I'm like, "What?" I'm
yeah.
like panicking because I was not expecting to code live that day.
Mm,
And I had done plenty before over the past few weeks, but it's just different when you're ambushed. You don't feel mentally prepared.
mm,
I was just super anxious. So she asked me to solve this question. It wasn't super hard. Like, it's not like she pulled out a hard leak code problem or something.
yeah.
It was like a basic CTE query with like something else. And I was like struggling through it, making silly mistakes. I think I forgot to put like the on clause on my join. Like, I was like just so panicked and
Mm,
nervous. And the whole time the hiring manager just stared at me. And I was asking questions like, are these two, is this primary key related to this foreign key? You know, I'm like asking
Mm,
questions, and she's just staring at me, not saying anything. And I'm like, oh my gosh, she hates me. Like, so yeah, it just like snowballed from there. The vibes were
yeah.
off. She was not collaborating. She wasn't
Hmm.
offering me feedback. And then after the interview, she emailed me and was like, "You're not moving forward because we need someone proficient in SQL." And I was like, I was not surprised I wasn't moving forward. I didn't do my best, but I was kind of shocked. I'm like, you just missed out on a potentially good candidate who does know SQL well because you didn't adequately prepare them for the
Right.
interview.
Yeah.
Like, if I had known I was doing a live coding and maybe she would have answered my questions and collaborated more and made me feel comfortable, I'm
Yeah.
sure I would have performed to like my, potential. But
Hmm.
that was like the worst I've ever coded in a technical interview ever. So I think the red flags are like, if they don't tell you ahead of time, they don't prepare you for the interview, they're not supporting you and collaborating with you during it. And then if they give you just like rude feedback after, like, I'm glad I am not working with that woman, honestly, because she would not have been a good manager.
Yeah, that's going to be how you work with her if you were hired. She's going to give you things to do and then not give you directions. And when you make a mistake, she's going to criticize you.
Yup, exactly.
So, right now in your current role, who do you collaborate with?
So our team is of 6 analysts total, and then we all report to our manager. So I collaborate a lot with like the other analysts. Like, sometimes we bounce ideas off each other, we help each other out. We all review each other's tickets before we like
Hmm.
submit them to like stakeholders or leadership. So I'm constantly like back and forth with them. And I also collaborate a lot with our PMs. So I worked with one PM for about 6 months. Lately, I've been working with a new PM on a different project. I work a lot with front end engineers. So making sure that we're collecting the right data points so that way I can do my metrics and analyses later on. I collaborate some with leadership. Crunchbase is like a mid-sized company, so it's a few levels up to the top from where I'm at, but I do get to do some analyses for leadership sometimes as well. And then I've also been working with some marketing stakeholders too lately.
Yeah. Do you work with any data scientists or researchers?
Not a whole lot. We do have a data science team. They're focused more on like the recommendation parts of our products, whereas our team is focused more on product experimentation and
Mm,
marketing and insights and reporting. So we don't cross paths a ton, but there is work sometimes with the data engineers. So optimizing different queries and views, which is honestly like one of my favorite things to work on. I love it when I get
yeah.
to work on data warehouse stuff.
Yeah. So a lot of people are confused about what data analysts do, what data scientists do. So can you tell us what are some overlaps and what are some differences, or for example, what are something they do you don't do, or you do they don't do?
Yeah, it is very confusing. So I see it as data analysts, data scientists, and data engineers. They're all their own separate roles, but they're all connected in like a Venn diagram. But
Mm,
depending on how much overlap you have, kind of depends on the specific role you're in, the company, the industry. And I think that's why it's so confusing for a lot of people because there's a lot of overlap between the roles. And then sometimes we see people with titles that don't really make complete sense based on the work they're doing. So I see analytics as someone who works with data a lot. They work a lot with reporting and dashboards, but then they also work heavy on the insights of analytics, a lot in SQL, sometimes Python. And then at the far end of the spectrum, and this is where I think data analytics really overlaps with data science, is A B testing and product experimentation. Because I know a lot of people that would classify a data analyst that does product experiments as a data scientist. But then what I
mm,
think really separates data analysts and data scientists are that data scientists are doing more modeling
Mm.
So, like machine learning and just more like technical stuff. So, I think they're doing a little bit less of like the stakeholders and reporting and business stuff and a
Yeah.
little more of the technical stuff. And then data engineers, I think they're the furthest removed from business and stakeholders. I think they work mostly with creating the pipelines and preparing the data so that the data analysts and the data scientists have what they
Yeah.
need.
And do the data scientists on the other team also analyze A/B tests?
At Crunchbase, no. A B testing is completely under the analytics team, which
Mm.
I think is super cool. Our data science team is like a true data science team. Like they're building recommendation systems and doing machine learning. And
Mm.
then A B testing gets to stay under our analytics team, which I really like because I love
Yeah.
product analytics and experimentation.
Mm. Gotcha. I think your role could in some other companies might be also called a product data scientist, where you analyze A/B tests and do a lot of SQL. I think, for example, I think maybe similar to the data scientist role at Facebook, Meta. I don't think they do like machine learning or like modeling. They're focusing on experimentation and metrics. Have you thought about getting into machine learning to learn or measure machine learning metrics or other collaborations on, for example, they're running some machine learning models or collecting some metrics and need your help to help them with like table or view?
Yeah, I would like to go more into machine learning in the future. I'm kind of deciding now, like, if I want to go more into like data science or data engineering. I think I'm getting
Mm,
to the point to where I like data analytics, but I'm also thinking about what other ways I can kind of grow into. But I do help a lot with like creating views and doing some things that would be maybe considered a little more on the data engineering side. So I feel like I'm getting a little bit of experience in those different domains, but I'm not really sure like which direction I for sure want to like go into.
yeah. And for folks who are still choosing their tracks, what's your recommendation? For example, if you enjoy X, Y, and Z, maybe you should do data analytics. And if you enjoy other things, maybe you should do like data science. What's your take on this?
Yeah, I think a lot of people that have worked in data have worked in really all three categories, at least
Yeah.
somewhat. So I think it's fine to just pick one and then pivot later. If you're really passionate about statistics and modeling, then absolutely go for data science. But I
Mm,
see a lot of people go for data science because it's like the sexy title. People want to be a data scientist, but it's like, do you really like machine learning and coding all day? Or would you
yeah.
rather be collaborating with teams more, you know?
Mm,
So I think people just need to do a little bit of a heart to heart and figure out what they like the most. I think my current role is very mixed. I do a ton of technical work. I do the A B testing and product experimentation. But then I also get to work a lot with stakeholders. I get to drive business decisions and create metrics that could literally change our decisions to cost us a lot of money. So I have a lot of
mm,
impact in the business as well. But then I'm also a little in the data engineering side, working in SQL and on views and optimization. So I think I'm kind of in like the sweet spot. I get to do a little bit of everything, which I like.
yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. And what's the typical growth tracks for data analyst? I assume there might be a staff principal level, you can become a manager. And if you want to grow, say, horizontal into other roles, what typical patterns you see?
Yeah, so typically what I've seen, there's like a regular data analyst or, kind of an entry level, associate level role. And then I see people moving into a senior data analyst. And then the next step from there, there's really two different paths you can take. So you can go down the IC path, that's individual contributor. So you can go into a lead or staff principal, depending on what levels your company has. Crunchbase doesn't have a lead level, they have a staff level. So that would be like the next level up for me on the IC side. And
Mm.
then the other option people can go down is the management track. So you're kind of taking a step back from hands-on technical work, and then you're managing people and enabling and empowering them. Right now, where I'm at in my career, I want to stay on the IC side. I love like doing analytics and doing data. So I don't see myself going down the management track anytime soon, but
Hmm.
I might eat my words in like 5 or 10 years. We'll see.
Or it could be sooner, 5 to 10 months. If there's good
We'll
opportunity.
see. That's true.
Yeah. So previously we briefly mentioned about salary negotiation, changing jobs. I know you talked about, double your salary when you move to different roles. Can you tell your story, how you negotiate your salary, and how was the percentage, or how much did you kind of increase your salary?
Yeah, I'll absolutely share a percentage. And I'm very transparent about salary. I love talking numbers. It only helps people. So if anyone's listening to this podcast, you can totally DM me and I'll tell you my exact numbers if it helps you
Mhm.
out with your career. Because I do want to be transparent, but I publicly only share percentages because I don't want to hurt my future negotiations.
Yeah.
So I got to keep a few cards close to my chest only because I have eyes on me on LinkedIn. But yeah, I started out my career probably at a mid salary for an entry level data analyst. It wasn't like super low, it wasn't like super high. And then from there, I got like, I think like a 5% raise, after my 1 year. I was like, not amazing, but it's something. And then a couple years into that role, I was taking on so much leadership. I had so much work that we actually hired me an intern because I couldn't get all my work done. So I was managing someone. And then this person came on full time. And I was like, wait, I'm still a data analyst and I have a direct report now. And I'm still
Right. And
making this
I coach
salary,
this
which is
person.
exactly. I'm like, I taught her everything I knew. I
Yeah.
taught her about the industry and I'm responsible for her and her work. So I realized I had so much leadership. And I was also helping develop insights and get data for our capital raise because I was working in a startup. So I'm like, y'all are trusting me with a lot of really important stuff and paying me an entry level salary. So what I did is was it that salary jump? Oh, yeah. So that time I asked for a raise and they basically said, no, we're not going to pay you more, but we'll bump you up to a senior level. And I was like,
Mm.
okay, not great. I like money. Who doesn't like money? But I'll
Right.
take the senior title. A year later, I end up that girl comes on full time. I end up bringing on another intern, so now I'm managing two people, and I'm like, okay, I'm definitely underpaid now. So
Mm.
this time, I went about it more strategically. Instead of being like, hey, like pay me more, I wrote up a one pager and I basically said, I love working at this company. I really enjoy the culture and how much I've learned here. So I was very like flattering and complimentary. These are the list of accomplishments and the things that I've brought to the company over the past 1 year. And basically, those 10 things that I listed out had brought so much money and customers and leadership to the company. And I just presented those on paper and quantified them that it was basically undeniable to sit there and say that I wasn't deserving of a raise. And then I ended the one pager with my research. I said, this is the market value between this range. And I cited my sources. And I am requesting a compensation adjustment to better match the market salary rate for a senior data analyst in tech.
Mm.
And they turned around and gave me exactly what I asked for. And they bumped me up to a data analytics manager title. So that was a promotion that I basically advocated for myself for. And I got I think it was a 33% raise, which is like
Wow.
very significant. Like I was like shaking when they told me. I was like, I was not expecting them to actually say yes. So always
Could have
ask and
asked
advocate for
more.
yourself. I know, should have asked for more. And from there, I left that company because I wasn't growing anymore. I needed to
Mm.
go somewhere new, spread my wings. That's when I landed at Freddie Mac. and I negotiated pretty like, I guess, hardball. Like I didn't share any numbers until the very end when they already like wanted me. And then I increased my salary again by I think like I think 30% again. Yeah, it was a little over 30%. And that was only 6 months later or so. So I got another 30% raise. And then 4 months later, I was on the job market again. I used the same negotiation techniques. And then I increased my salary another 17%, I think, coming to Crunchbase. So basically, from November 2021 to like August 2022, like that 11-month period. Wait, that was not 11 months. I don't know what months I just said, but that 11-month period, I over doubled my salary.
That's awesome. So, what is your negotiation strategy?
Yeah, so I really used two different strategies for those negotiations. The first one is that if you're seeking a promotion or a raise within your current company, I wrote up a one pager. I made sure I had myself together, I had done my research, and I quantified all of my accomplishments and showed all I had done and brought to the company. And then I showed that my salary was below market rate and asked for a compensation adjustment. So that was like the first method I used. The second method I used was changing companies. And earlier we talked about job hopping. Job hopping is one of the best ways to increase your salary, especially over many years. You're always going to make more money changing jobs.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of times candidates feel pressured when recruiters ask them to share their current salary, and or they will ask you, what kind of range are you looking for? How do you handle those questions?
Yeah, so I will absolutely not say a number. And I know people feel differently about this question. If you do have a certain number that you're targeting, you know you want that much and you don't care, you're happy with it, you
Mm.
can absolutely be that transparent from the beginning and say your number. So that is totally fine. For me, I want to hear their budget because when I left my first company that I was at for 3 years, I was hoping to get X amount. I didn't know how much I was worth. And then when I started interviewing, I got offers for like, I don't know, I can't do the percents this quickly in my head, but the offers I got were all like at least 20% more than I was like hoping for. So
Mm.
I think if you sell yourself short by saying a number instead of learning the company's budget, sometimes you like don't really know that you're worth a certain amount and you lose money. So my main method is to flip the questions back on the company. So if they ask me my expected salary, I do not say a number and I ask them their budget. And then from
Mm.
there, I either reaffirm that it aligns or I say, my market range is actually here. Is there any flexibility? If not, like break up, it's not going to work.
Yeah. And during a conversation, sometimes it can be really awkward. Can we try to do a role play where I'm the recruiter and you're the candidate? Hi, Jess. So, what's your expectation for salary? We really like you as a candidate. We're very excited to bring you on board.
That's awesome. I'm so happy to hear that. I'm very excited about this opportunity as well. I'd actually really love to meet with more members of the team and learn more about the position so I can better assess an accurate market salary for this role. But I'd love to hear your budget if you're able to share it with me.
Yeah, typically we don't share budget with the candidate, and then this is a standard question we collect. We ask candidates about their salary. We ask everyone we interview this question, so it will be helpful for us to make the decision. Is there any chance you can maybe share a range with us?
Unfortunately, I don't believe I can share a range without better understanding what the role entails, but we can discuss it later on in the process, or if you have a ballpark range, I'd love to hear that as well.
Okay. How does that
I will
feel?
not say a number. You will not torture it out of me. But in all seriousness though, I would say 9 out of 10 times they will share a number with you. Like sometimes they'll push
Mm,
it on later in the interview process,
yeah.
but they'll usually just tell you. And I appreciate that transparency. I'm not going to get deep into an interview process if I don't know the salary. Like maybe I'll go
Yeah.
one more interview, but if you won't tell me your budget for the role, I'm
Mm.
not going to waste my time if you're trying
Yeah.
to like lowball me, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you did really well. You were very polite. You didn't get defensive, and you are very strong, adamant about your boundary. I'm not going to tell you. You're not going to get a number from me, but yeah, I think you did really well. And also, there's a lot of awkwardness in the
It's
conversation.
so
And
awkward. Yeah.
yeah, so how do you get comfortable with that awkwardness?
I just think it's an uncomfortable thing. And I think that you just have to accept that it's awkward and it's
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable. A lot of times I'll even have recruiters like call it out and be like, all right, here's the awkward part of the interview,
Mm,
salary, we got to discuss it.
yeah.
So I think you know that it's awkward. They know it's awkward. They know what you're doing playing the game. You know that they know what you're doing. Like
Mm,
it really is like an awkward like sidestep game you just have to like play to get through it. And I think you just have to like embrace it and be okay with the fact that it's a little uncomfortable, but if you don't force yourself to confidently go through it and do it, you could literally lose out on 10, 20, $30,000, maybe more.
yeah. And do you usually practice with someone?
Yeah, I think, which I actually haven't gone through that in a while because I haven't been on the job
Mhm.
market, but I think it really does help to role play and it does feel kind of silly and awkward if you're practicing with like your friend or your brother, your mom, whatever, but
Yeah.
it really does help because if you verbally say it out loud, it's different than just reading it in your notes on a piece of paper. And
Mhm.
another thing I'll add too, if they do share the budget, you do need to affirm if that is in your salary expectations or not. Because recruiters have a job to do too, and they need to know, is this the right salary for this candidate? Are they worth spending time on? So you don't want to just be rude and be like, I'm not telling you. Like, if they do come forward with a salary range, you need to say, yes, that meets my expectations. I'm so happy to hear, because you also need to validate the company and make sure that they know that you're still really interested.
Mm. And during the interview, sometimes the recruiter asks you, "Do you have any questions for me?" How do you answer those questions?
Yeah, so my first job search of 2022, it was my first time job searching in a long time. I think I asked questions because I felt like I had to. I
Mm.
was like, I have to ask questions so I look good. I have to ask really thoughtful, insightful questions to stand out. It's just what I have to do to get through the interview.
Yeah.
By the time I got to my second job search, I was much more cynical and I was interviewing the company a lot harder the second
Mm.
time I job searched because I wanted to make sure it was a good fit. So I think the questions came out of like pure curiosity versus me trying to like look good and ask good questions.
Yeah. And it's also a opportunity for you to show you did research on your company, sell yourself.
Absolutely. If you can throw in a question that shows that you went the extra mile to learn about the company and keep up with what they're doing, you're absolutely going to stand out. And you do want to sell yourself with every question you ask. You don't want to ask, like, how many pets do you have? No, you want to ask about skills or career growth, things that will really show things about you as a candidate.
Hmm. And previously, you mentioned you had mentors. How did you meet your mentor?
Yeah, I have a few different mentors. The funniest story I think I have, I actually just talked to my mentor about this yesterday and we laughed about
Hmm.
it. But my first job search of 2022, I had three job offers. And so I had to turn down two, which was
Yeah.
horrible because I had three offers I was genuinely excited about. And turning down one of these offers was like heartbreaking. I loved the hiring manager. I knew she was a great leader. We had a lot in common. We vibed well, but I had higher offers other places.
Mm.
And I just saw more career growth other places. But when I turned on the offer, I sent an email and I was like, I really hate to turn this down. I just, see better career growth in a different offer I have. However, I really enjoyed getting to know the hiring manager, so and so. We had a lot in common, and I'd really love to keep in touch with her in the future. And
Mm.
the recruiter shared that with her. The hiring manager reached out to me the next week and decided to set up a monthly mentoring session.
Wow.
And now we still talk every month. And we laughed about it. Like yesterday, I was like, remember when you offered me a job and I said no? So you never know when you're going to meet mentors.
Mm-hmm. And also, when you really appreciate someone, express it, let someone know. And maybe that's a great way for you to connect someone. So, Jess, you have 128,000 followers on LinkedIn. How did you start your LinkedIn creator journey?
Yeah, it's honestly crazy to think about. So I just started in April of 2022. So it's been like a super like hard and fast journey for me,
Mm-hmm.
but I wasn't really trying to be a content creator. Like I never ever would have dreamed that I would have made it this far or that anyone would even care what I had to say. But I was just laying in bed one night. It was a Sunday night and I was on my phone. I posted this quick post about remote work. I was feeling kind of sentimental because it was Sunday night and I was like, thank goodness I don't have to go to an office tomorrow. Like, what a relief and blessing and privilege this is. So I made a post about it, literally just like fell asleep, woke up with like a few hundred likes, and I was like, that's weird. I don't even know if I know a few hundred people on LinkedIn. And then I had, I think, like a meeting that day. And then I got out of the meeting and I had over 1,000 likes because like the LinkedIn commented on my post.
Oh,
And
okay.
I was like, what? So from there, it just like blew up. I
Mm.
got like 45,000 reactions and almost 5 million views. And of course, this was like the old LinkedIn algorithm when times
Yeah.
were good with the algorithm. But
Mm.
yeah, from there, I told my coworkers, I was like, I'm just a one hit wonder. Like, I don't think I'm going to post again. No one's going to care what I have to say. This is so embarrassing. Like, I don't want to try and fail. And I was like, okay, I'll give it another shot. I posted a sequel post and got 1,000 likes. And I was like, oh, shoot, what? So for the next few weeks, I was kind of developing my niche, figuring out who my audience
Mm.
was. I was leaning into like data and some SQL stuff, remote work. And from there, it just like took off. And I've had the most like consistent growth, which is awesome. And I've just developed a really great community.
Yeah, that's awesome. So now, how does LinkedIn change your career, change your personal life?
Well, it's basically flipped my life upside down and completely changed it in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely really hard because I spend a few hours a day working on content creation, brand deals, LinkedIn courses, developing future business ideas. It's just opened up all these opportunities that I didn't even think was that I didn't even think were possible. So it's definitely really forced me to manage my time better, which is something I'm like still working on all the time because I'm managing my 9 to 5, my side biz, LinkedIn learning, and then of course my
Mm-hmm.
personal relationships. So it's really forced me to be a lot more organized, and it's just opened up so many doors, like the professional opportunities, the people I've been able to meet, getting to make courses with LinkedIn learning. It's just helped my brand awareness, my credibility, and it's just made me grow so much as a person.
Yeah. So, is it the first time you discovered you're a good writer, you're creative? I saw your post, you have like a lot of different ideas, both for your, when you write your own story or whenever you partner with a company. Have you ever taken any like writing courses or did some creative project before?
Honestly, no. Like I was in the gifted program in elementary school and I was always like a very creative person. Like the
Mm.
teacher would say to do one thing and I would like multiply it by 100 and like scale it like way bigger and way fancier than they asked for. So I've always
Yeah.
been someone who was like kind of out of the box and creative, but I've never really done any sort of writing classes. I've always been more of a math person. So
Mm-hmm.
the fact that I even have like a side business that's based on writing is like baffling to me.
Yeah. Yeah. How does it feel now you get to tap into that creative power you had when you were a child?
It honestly feels amazing. And I think for so long I struggled with it because I didn't want people to think I'm just an influencer. Like I'm just doing these silly videos. I'm just like a figurehead. I don't
Mm-hmm.
actually know anything about analytics. I don't have the technical, background. I'm just creating videos and, just a face on LinkedIn. Like I struggled with that because I didn't want people to think that about me. I wanted
Right.
people to see me as the credible data analyst that I am, along with the content creator side with me. And
Mm-hmm.
one of my friends, Peyton Janney, go follow her on LinkedIn. But she actually told me, she's like, being a content creator and a LinkedIn learning instructor, that's part of your package as a data analyst. You're able to offer all of these data analytics skills, but you're
Mm.
also offering the creative side of you to companies. You offer a different skill set than most data analysts have. And that helped me learn to see it as a part of me as a candidate.
Yeah. Next time when an interviewer asks you SQL questions, you can just counter with, "Have you checked out my LinkedIn learning course?"
Honestly, I'm tempted to send the link to that hiring manager. That was really rude to me.
Yeah, I think it's
It would be
awesome
kind
that,
of petty, but
yeah. Yeah, I was kidding. But I think it's a great way to have fun, be playful on LinkedIn, and also go very deep on your niche. And you have been putting out content consistently. Do you feel burnout someday? Do you feel stressed? Oh, I haven't put out anything today, or the last post I spent 3 hours on it and then nobody likes it.
oh, yes to all of that you just said. And I know you know how all of those feelings feel too as a fellow content creator, but
Mm,
I do feel burnout at times, but I think half of the reason I've been successful is because I have been so consistent. Even on weeks where I was really burnout and struggling, I was maybe recycling old content, posting old posts again, or posting things that felt fun for me at the time and didn't feel as much like work.
mm.
And I don't recommend working through burnout instead of taking care of the burnout. But I think being a content creator is one of those jobs where if you blink and take a long time off, it's almost like the world moves on without you. Like it's kind of hard to
Yeah.
keep that. There is a lot of pressure to always be consistent and always be
Mhm.
posting. So I think that's hard. And then sometimes, like the time you spend on content, like I made this really good A/B testing carousel once and it only got like a few hundred likes. And I was like, are you kidding me? I spent so much time on this. This should be
Yeah.
viral. So sometimes you think things are going to perform better and they don't. Or the silliest, most surface level posts are the ones that do the best. So you just never know what's going to, resonate with people.
Yeah. And that's kind of the same advice when I give people what's your advice on writing on LinkedIn? I think there definitely are some best practices. For example, make sure your language is clear. Don't just put like a wall of text, have, spaces. Make sure it's easy for people to understand, but also everyone's style is different. I think the first time my post went viral was a nerdy joke, and you just have to experiment with it. And also LinkedIn algorithm keep changing. I would say you do need to know the algorithm a little bit, but I would also say be true to your own voice. You don't have to completely be like, okay, algorithm want me to do X, Y, and Z, then I have to do X, Y, and Z. I think the ones that stand out and also the audience like are the ones not afraid to be themselves. And I have saw you posted a wide range of topic, and sometimes I really feel inspired by you. Oh, I wish, I also have that fear, have that experience, but I just feel so scared to share publicly. And so what's in the future? Do you want to say have millions of followers on LinkedIn and create more SQL courses, or spend more time in your current company as a data analyst?
Yeah, honestly, I'm trying to figure out what my future looks like right now, but right now I see my future as growing on other social media platforms. Of course, I'm still going to be consistent on LinkedIn and
Mm,
consistently growing there, but I want to really drill into TikTok and Instagram more and grow my newsletter because I want to build like a more intimate relationship with my followers. I think LinkedIn is hard because there's so many people out there. I have like my circle that I talk to all the time, but it's harder for me to connect with a lot of my followers. So I'm
mm,
finding that Instagram and my newsletter, like those are the people who are a lot more dedicated to my content, that the ones that follow those. So when I see
mm,
people participating in my sequel challenges in my newsletter or replying on my Instagram stories about what I'm doing that day, like I think it's really cool to be able to connect on a deeper level with people there. So I definitely want to continue to grow on other platforms. I definitely want to make more courses. I have so much fun teaching things that I'm passionate about, especially SQL. So I see more courses in my future. And I also want to get out there next year more. Like I want to go to more conferences, maybe have some speaking gigs, and really just grow professionally in that direction.
awesome. And in the next 3 to 6 months, what are going to be your the areas of focus?
Next 3 to 6 months, it's so hard to predict because my life has changed every few months so much. Like everything is just moving so quickly in the best way possible.
Yeah.
I think that in the next few months, I would probably want to land at least one speaking gig for 2024. That'd be my
Mm-hmm.
goal. And then maybe develop one more course. And then
Mm.
I've also been working on some things with my business behind the scenes. I haven't
Yeah,
announced and launched it all yet. I would love to launch my business because I've been keeping it a secret for so long. And I'm just excited to like put the name out there and, start branding that and building that up too.
that's awesome. So when you're not working or creating content, what do you like to do? How do you relax or have fun?
I honestly spend too much time working and I'm working on balancing my life better in the future.
Mm-hmm.
That is my biggest goal, like ending 2023, going into 2024. But my favorite thing in the world is traveling. I love going to new places. I got to travel a lot in 2023 and it was great. I love going on vacations, especially like with my husband, having that quality time together.
Mm.
So that's like one of my big motivators for working so hard and doing what I do because I want to be able to go on these trips and spend time with my husband. Then I also really like working out. I like to go on a lot of walks. I have 3 dogs, so I spend a lot of time walking because I have three
Mm.
dogs.
Yeah.
I have a Peloton, so I love to cycle. It's good stress relief for me.
Mm.
And then I also just really like reading. I'm honestly reading like 5 books at once. I don't know why I'm like this, but I just can't stick to one book. But I'm reading a fiction book right now. And then the most interesting book I'm reading is Invisible Women.
Mm.
I have read a few chapters and I haven't touched it in like a few months now, but I need to get back to it and finish it. It's about how data is, it's like a data based book about gender inequality.
Mm.
And this book is like straight facts, no opinions. Like there's no author opinions in the book. It's all research studies and actual things that have happened, all
Yeah.
backed by data. Like it
Mm.
is just such a great book. It talks about how there's like an inequity with like household chores and salaries, even public bathrooms. And it just
Mm.
talks about the differences for men and women in those categories. It's fascinating.
Yeah. And if you have your favorite book to recommend, you think everyone should read, what would that be?
Okay, my favorite fiction book is Big Little Lies. They also had a series on Hulu that is
Mm.
such a good book. It was just the most fun book for me to read. My favorite nonfiction book is Weapons of Math Destruction by Kathy O'Neill. And anyone that works in the data space or even not in the data space needs to read this book. It's written in such a like an informal, casual, conversational way. so anyone can understand it regardless of their technical abilities. But it talks about the ethical issues of data and the dangers of algorithms and how they
Mm,
can really turn into weapons if they're not used carefully. And I
yeah.
think the ethics of data are going to be even more important in the next few years.
Hmm. And what do you think about the future of data analytics?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of AI buzz right now. I think it's mostly like, I think right now it's a lot of talk without a whole lot of action. I think AI is like the cool new trend and everyone wants to hop on this train. But I don't
Hmm.
think a lot of companies really have the infrastructure to be implementing a lot of AI yet. I think in the next few years, companies are going to be more focused on ethics, data privacy, data governance, and kind of putting in the tools and resources in place to make sure that data is handled ethically and securely.
Mm. And have you adopted any kind of AI analytics tools in your current workflow?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of ChatGPT. It's definitely not good for copying and pasting code. So, no one go just like copy and paste code from ChatGPT. Make sure you know what you're doing. But I use it a lot for just brainstorming metrics and projects. The other day, I was like, hey, ChatGPT, give me ideas for user retention metrics for a SaaS company. And it came up with like
Mm,
some really good ideas, and I'll even use it and ask it where I should eat dinner. So I definitely have adopted ChatGPT into my life.
that's awesome. So before we wrap up, where can people find you online?
So my number one place is LinkedIn. You honestly can't hide from me there. Just kidding. But I'm also on Instagram and TikTok as Jess Ramos Data. So go find me there. I also have a newsletter. You can find it in the link in any of the bios of my social media pages. And I send out weekly data, SQL, and career tips. Lately, I've been doing SQL challenges, so definitely sign up for my newsletter. And I'm also on LinkedIn Learning. I have two courses out. I have Preparing to Get a Job in Data Analytics, which is designed to prepare you for a job in data analytics. That was a great explanation. Then my second course is on intermediate SQL, and it's focused on solving business problems in SQL and using real world applications for SQL.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing your career journey with us and all the SQL tips. Recommend everyone to go to follow Jess and check out her LinkedIn learning courses, subscribe to her newsletter, and looking forward to see your journey after 3 to 6 months. It sounds like you're doing a lot of things, and I'm very excited for your future.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.